Just a second. It's spinning. All right. Well, hello, everybody. And you guys know because of my advertisement, I am super excited to talk to this young man. You know, I've done. Let me get rid of that. Oh, I had to shut my other screen up. You know, me, us old guys, we aren't that technical, Deryn. You know, we help along the way. Anyway, I have been really looking forward to this. I've interviewed all kinds of fascinating people from all over, the world that have done all kinds of weird things. And I think I put this one up at the top. And for those of you who know, I interviewed Callie, which would be Deryn's mom, just a little while ago. She came out and spoke. She stayed at my house, had a great time, and I got to hear this amazing story through her eyes. But I'm smart enough to know that perception's a funny thing. And, the way she sees it isn't necessarily going to be the way that Deryn sees it. So first, everybody help me welcome Deryn Blackwell, who is just a badass, in my opinion. And, him and I were talking about this a little bit ahead of time. And just one of the rare, I think, individuals who can overcome such an amazing thing and still come out of it on top. So first of all, Deryn, I salute you. But I guess just to kind of start, tell me what life was like before the diagnosis.
So I was a very athletic kid. I spent most of my time outside. I would be super fit. I had like a six pack at 7, that kind of crazy outside type. I mean, I'm autistic, ADHD, Tourette's. I mean, I got diagnosed when I was 7 as well because the teacher found me like sharpening everyone's pencils. So she was like, that's a bit weird. But yeah, just normal. Maybe not so normal for the amount of exercise because I was training with adults. I was doing loads of rugby, doing jujitsu. Yeah, very active. And that took up most of my life before because I was only 10 and a half when I got diagnosed. So it wasn't really much of my life that
Yeah.
before. Yeah, most of it's afterwards.
So it sounds like to me you were a normal boy,
Pretty
crazy
much.
running
Yeah.
100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So what tell me how you got diagnosed. What led you to getting diagnosed?
So I was being autistic, I was very particular about my food. So I'd have the same thing pretty much all the time. My lunch used to be just a jacket potato, so like a baked potato with butter, cheese, beans, and coleslaw in a very particular order. I would love it. I could eat it forever. All of a sudden, that was disgusting. I just could not. There just something changed in it. Something changed. It would taste like metal and was just kind of dull tasting. Um, at first, my mum thought I was just being picky. Like she just thought I was being funny. Um, but over time, maybe I think it maybe was about a week. I was laying in bed and I would lay on one side and I'd feel something inside of me like fall. And then I'd lay on the other side and I'd feel it fall back. And so I would just, over the course of maybe 5 or 6 days, I would just feel this thing growing inside of me. And eventually it got to the weekend. I think this was maybe a Friday. And I was retching as I was getting like, I would wake up and I'd be like trying to throw up, but I hadn't been eating properly because things had been tasting funny. So nothing was coming up. I was just end up having like stomach cramps every morning. And I think this was like the second or third day this had happened. So mum sent me to the doctors, took me to there, and they said I can't even remember what it was, glandular fever or something like that, something just minor. And they said, just take him for a blood test after the weekend. He'll be fine. Just take him to the hospital after the weekend. And so we went up the next day because mum was like, not having that. It's been just weird. So I had the blood test and then we went out for lunch because all of a sudden I was hungry. I was like, oh, I want KFC. Funny enough, it just wanted some KFC. And we got there. This was maybe a couple of hours afterwards because we went to A&E as well and spent a few hours there just to get a second opinion. And they still said something that wasn't what it was. Maybe 4 hours later, mum got a phone call that said, oh, you need to come back to the hospital. We found something in his blood. Go back there. I get put into a separate side room all on my own. And they come in, they start putting numbing cream on me.
Mhm.
And like basically everywhere, all on here, on the back of my hands, basically anywhere that they could stick a cannula in. I didn't know this at the time. I was just sat in the chair. There's pictures of me, like just all confused, like, oh, this is weird. And then maybe 10 minutes later, these, I think it's maybe two nurses and a doctor comes in and they sit us down. They basically say, oh, Deryn's got leukemia. And I didn't know what it was. So I was just there, sat like, oh, I'm confused. I only knew it was bad because dad went silent and mum started crying. That was the only cues that I had that it was like, oh, okay, maybe this is bad.
Right.
Um, and I asked mum, I was like, oh, what's leukemia? And she had a friend when she was younger that had died from leukemia, and so she knew what it was. All she said, all she knew what it was though was it's blood cancer. Obviously, I knew what cancer was. I heard the cancer word, and I was like, oh shit! I fucking like panicked, like started crying myself. Then I was like, oh, what's going on? And then after then, it was just hectic, crazy,
Mm.
like crazy. Nurses would wheel me out, I'd have cannulas in my hands, and then maybe 15 minutes later, blue lighted to another ambulance, sent in an ambulance, blue lights on, everything to another hospital. It was nuts.
Yeah. So how did you handle when you heard cancer? What went on between your ears? I mean, were you like, oh shit, this is like, I
Yeah.
mean, did you think right there, oh my God, I'm going to die?
It wasn't so much I'm gonna die, it was I don't know, not necessarily that, but it was definitely alarm bells and panic because even at 10, I knew what cancer was. Like you'd see the adverts on TV of like
Yeah.
at the time, I think it was all be grey and there was like a bald kid walking down the corridor with a drip and stuff like that. And you'd have that picture in your head. You're like, fuck, that's gonna be me.
Right.
Oh wow. Okay, there. But then it all happened so quick that maybe in the next 3 hours, I'd had 4 attempts at cannulas, 2 collapsed veins in the back of my hand, um, blue lighted to another hospital that was an hour and a half away that we got there in 45 minutes. So that in my kid brain was like, this is amazing. Like the paramedics in there was like, look at all the street cameras going off. And you would, there was one stretch of road towards the hospital that they had to drive past, and there was about 6 cameras on there, and you'd see them going bang, 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 because you were going so quick down that road. So they were good at distracting you.
Mhm.
They were good at keeping you from focusing on you're in an ambulance because you've got cancer. Like they were good at that. And then got to the hospital, and as soon as I remember, as soon as I went into this cancer ward, because it was a specialist children's cancer ward that they were taking me to, I just felt this breath of like relief. They instantly made you feel safe, like they knew what they were doing. They did it every day. They made you feel safe. You felt safe instantly. It was like being welcomed into some big warm bubble. And so then everything feels calm. Then you're like, okay, you feel settled. Then things start the next day. So they let you settle for a bit and then things start up the next day. So you have time to like realize what's going on and to deal with it.
Yeah. So when did you realize you were about to go down this road where you were going to get your ass kicked?
Well, I I never really thought it was going to be hard. That was the thing. I don't know if it was delusion or just or hope or what, but I always knew that I was going to be okay. I said right from the beginning that I was going to be fine. And I'd also my one of my first times that I had steroids was right at the very beginning. They gave me some, and up until that point, I'd had no emotions. I had no way of being able to understand anyone else's point of view.
Mhm.
As soon as I had them, I was across the room from a little boy, and he had wires just all over him, and he was less than one. He was just a little baby, and he was just dancing in his bed to like I can't even remember what it was, but he was dancing away, all happy, and he had tubes all over the place. And I was there, way older than him, could understand what was about to happen to me, and I was like, well, if he's fine, I can do it. If he's okay, I can. And from then on, it was like, well, I'm not going to complain because there are little ones that are having worse than me. And I never really thought that anyone else was having anything less traumatic or worse than me, even though I went through like crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone had their own thing.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that you can find strength out of those little kids. I think that speaks a lot about you, Deryn. I think it speaks a lot about your character and who you are. I'm impressed by that. You know, that's a big deal, because it'd have been very easy to just bitch and complain, you know, and be a victim. But instead, you found a way to gain power out of that. That gives me goosebumps. That's badass. I think that's awesome. Okay, so you get the diagnosis. How long did you spend in the hospital?
Well, I think it was about 6 weeks. I'm not even sure. Maybe less than that, because I reacted really well to the chemotherapy.
Okay.
So my white blood count, which was the count that they were looking at, which was the trigger for the leukemia, which was also the reason why I had that growth inside of me, because that was my spleen.
Okay.
Where all my white blood cells were being pumped out of was my spleen.
Okay.
And so I had the second highest blood count that hospital had ever seen. But I'd effectively got rid of the cancer cells within a week.
Okay.
But then they had to keep me in for like maybe a few weeks longer to then just make sure that my organs weren't shutting down or anything like that, and nothing was happening. So they let me go back. I went back to school for the summer, after the summer holidays.
So did you think then, this is over, I'm done, we got this beat, next?
Well, effectively, yeah, the cancer's gone. But what they tell you is, for leukemia, the ALL specifically, the treatment for boys is for 3 years, because it can reside in the testicles and the spinal cord. So for girls, it's only 2 years, because they don't have testicles. So they only can reside in the spine. But so I knew that I was going to have chemo of some kind over the next 3 years. But the initial bombardment of get this out your body was only a couple weeks, maybe a month or so. And then it would go onto a regime. So it wouldn't be all the time. You'd go through loads of chemo and then none. You'd only have like tablets at home. Other times you'd spend loads of time in hospital because you'd have some. And most of the time I spent in hospital was because I was like neutropenic. So I had no white blood cells, and I'd get a temperature or something. And that was it. So it was fairly normal, except for the fact that I had loads of hospital trips. So I went back to school. Although for year 6, I only had 37% attendance. I know that much. But for year 7, the year afterwards, I went back for school the entire year. I was completely fine. And that was technically my second year of treatment. So it was fairly normal. It was only in the summer holidays of year 7. In fact, it was the January. So that was 2012, I think January of 2012, I started to get a sore throat. And that was when the secondary one had started to grow, but we didn't know. And that was in year 8 that things started to kick off again. It was only a few years that it was kind of normal.
Yeah. So you start getting this other growth. And so I'm assuming you go back to the hospital. And were you thinking, oh my gosh, here we go again? Or were you like, fine?
Yeah. I was worried about it. But there was also, I was going to hospital. They were looking at me. I was still having chemo. I was still under treatment. So I didn't really have that thought in my head that it was, oh, this could be cancer again. But I just had a sore throat, and I was going back and seeing a consultant every month. And she would comment I think it took about 6 months for them to take him out. And it was my tonsils. They were changing. They were red and inflamed one month, and then the next month they had like white spots on them. The next month they had black spots on them. The next month they were like slightly yellow with other spots on them and stuff. And she was like, oh, they're fine. They're just inflamed. And when they finally got them out, ENT surgeon who was the specialist for that department for 20 years. He said they were the hardest tonsils he'd ever had to take out. He basically said that he ripped them out of my throat. He had to pull them out of my throat. They were like little stones. So they calcified in my throat. They calcified in my throat because they had undergone so many changes. And looking back, the knowledge that I have now, I understand what I think happened was that I'd actually killed the cancer and contained it within my tonsils, because that's what it does. The calcification happens from dead cells being built up over and over again to entrap something. And what had happened was there was no spread of the cancer other than maybe a little bit after they cut it out. But it had contained itself. It had just turned them into little stones. But then after they took it out, that was when they realized that it was extremely rare. And then they went from there. So.
Yeah, I got a question on that, but just before, I wanted to let you know your mom is in the chat. She's watching right now. So she's posted in there, hello, and this is my baby boy, and all that, silly emotional mom stuff that goes on. It's going on right now. I just wanted you to know. Anyways, I find it so the chemotherapy and all that kept it contained in there. What caused it to drive back and get mean?
Well, the initial thing was I never had any side effects other than a sore throat from it. And then once they took the tonsils out, they didn't know what it was. They had no idea what cancer or what, even if it wasn't cancer, they had no idea what had happened to my throat. So I went for a PET scan afterwards to see if there was any spread or anything like that. And they saw there was a bit more. So then they took away more of my throat, my soft palate. But after that, there was no real cancer left. But the only reason they knew that it was cancer was because they'd sent slices of it all over the world. There's places in Australia, in London, in Canada, in America, all over the place. They analyzed it. I think it took a few months for them to find out what it was. And it was only matched slightly to, I think there was one strand of its DNA that was similar to leukemia. So they classed it as a relapse rather than a secondary cancer. Even though it was a secondary cancer, they classed it as a relapse. So that's why they then went through the regime of loads of chemo again, bone marrow transplants, all of that. And then the reason why it lasted so long was because of the complications from that treatment. It wasn't the cancer necessarily. So yeah, it's very confusing.
Yeah. So the treatments that they were giving you while you were doing that was causing as much harm, if not more, than the cancer itself that was going on.
Effectively, yeah. So they'd given me loads of supplements that were 100% glucose. And when I went for this PET scan, the radiologist said that she was going to inject me with irradiated glucose, and explained that glucose was cancer's favorite food because it's the most fast. I mean, it's any cell's favorite food, but cancer cells are more aggressive than normal cells. So they eat up the food quicker than the healthy cells do. Okay. And then they reproduce quicker. And so the radiation part of it was so that they could see where the cells were going, where the sugar was being drawn to, and then they could see where the cancer cells were in your body. And the radiation was so that the scanner could see it. Once you're told that, you're like, well, I've been having 100% glucose for the last 6 months, and God knows how long I've been having other sorts of sugary things, because most of the supplements that they give you are full of sugar. And I'd gone through countless other ones before I'd even got to this 100% glucose one that had probably countless other sugars and all sorts in there. So if I had any form of cancer growing in my body, that would have just fed it. Just it would have been a feast every day. So
yeah, crazy. So when did you get readmitted back to the hospital?
I mean, for the whole time I was still going back every month, but then I think I got readmitted, maybe it was a month after I started year 8. So that was, I think I had treatment for a total of maybe a year before I got sent to Bristol, which was February 2013. So I think mid 2012.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then
Yeah.
how long were you in the hospital for that stint?
That was a long time. I think that was when I spent, because I was in the first hospital that I got sent to when I initially got diagnosed, because that was the hospital I was under. I was there for maybe 6 months, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just in hospital. Didn't really go home because there was so much intensive treatment going on. They just wanted to bombard my immune system and every cell in my body with chemo to just it was conditioning for my bone marrow transplants, because that was the decision that they came upon. They were like, well, we have no idea what to do with these cancers. We haven't seen it before. I was the 51st person to ever have that cancer in their records. I was only the 5th person on the planet. So there was no regime, there was no plan. So what they did was they just treated me as the relapse. So that was loads of chemo, conditioning for a bone marrow transplant. So it was most of the time just isolation and within hospital. So just chemo most of the time. When I wasn't having chemo, I was still in hospital because I was too ill to risk going home because there's risk of infection and other things like that. So in my memory, I spent most of that time in a room with a window that was this big that I couldn't really look out of. So, and then went from there. I think I got to spend a week at home between there and going to Bristol, where I then spent, I think, a month having radiotherapy in a nice apartment. It may have been a bit longer than that, but radiotherapy was messing with my head. I don't
Yeah.
know. But then after that, after all my radiotherapy was done, I went into hospital and didn't come out of the room for 9 months, except for scans and stuff that couldn't be done in the room. And even then, they brought in ultrasound machines into the room. I could only have, I think there was 2 people that were allowed to come, 2 family members that you had to write down before I even went into the room, who would then be the only people that were allowed to come and visit me in that room. Everyone else, I could have to wave at them out the window, and they'd stand on the road outside the hospital on some bit that could just so happen to look at my window. And that was 9 months in that room.
So what does a young man do for a year or better in a hospital bed? I mean, what do you do to keep your brain entertained?
Yeah. So a lot of the time it was, I mean, I was off my face on a lot of drugs a lot of the time. Which, I mean, I got addicted to a lot of them. Um, it's what happens to someone's brain when they have nothing else and they're being fed these pain medications that make them feel nice and anti-sickness drugs that make them feel like they're on heroin.
Yeah.
Because I've spoken to heroin addicts and we've conferred stories and they're like, yeah, that feels like heroin. And I'm like, okay. So there was a lot of that, but there was also loads of people with, like, I had Amazon wish lists that people would just buy me loads of stuff, and it just constantly just a supply of new games, puzzles, just things to watch, just books, everything. There was one time I had my birthday and there was just, my whole room was filled wall floor to ceiling with birthday cards, because the amount of people sent me, and each of them came with like a little gift or something like that. It was just constant distractions.
Maybe that was a good thing, though. Do you look back at that and think that was a good thing that you had all that?
Oh yeah, definitely. And also, I mean, a lot of the time it was pure disassociation as well. I definitely now because I was autistic, and like I said at the beginning, I had that promise to myself that I wasn't going to complain about anything and anything that was happening to me. And I'd been having, like, I don't want to say prophetic because that sounds big-headed, but they were, as if you would say, if someone else was telling you, they'd be like, oh, okay, that's weird. I'd be having these weird dreams that would be kind of confirming my beliefs and also completely changing my brain chemistry into believing things that I had never believed before. And like you could, so before I was ill, you could class me as basically I was this conservative, big-headed, like normal kid, like angry kid. And then I'd become really soft and spiritual and things that I just had no idea about before, purely because I was dreaming them and having these weird things going on in my head. So everything that was happening to me, I just accepted as what I'd chosen to happen to me. I'd even said to my mum that I'd had this dream once where I was just stood in this big room and it just felt like I was in a queue for something. There's my British coming out. I was in a queue and and you'd get to this turnstile point and up above there'd be like a menu and you could choose every life event that was going to happen to you and you'd be like, oh, okay, I want this to happen to me, I want this experience, I want this experience, I want this. And as soon as you step through that door, that's your experience, that's your life, there you go, that's who you are. And so that dream has stayed with me since I had it when I was like 12.
Yeah.
And that's what was always just kind of getting me through things. Every day is a new day. It was just, okay, see what happens, see what happens. And it was only right at the end when I got to the hospice where I was kind of like, well, fuck, maybe I was wrong. Shit. But I even said to my mum, I was like, I'm more pissed off that I was wrong that I'm fucking dying. Like, so
when did you accept the fact that you were probably going to die? That this was probably the end for you? What happened? Because you seem like the super positive, I'm going to make it, everything's fine.
oh yeah. Even
So
in the
what
hospice, even in the hospice, when I first went, I was like, nah, I just didn't accept it. I didn't believe it. And then I don't know. I think it was maybe a few weeks of just having complete panic attacks. And there was just a time where before I started having the cannabis, there was maybe a week where there was 3 days. I still to this day have no idea what was going on. And I've asked other people, I've asked my mum, I've asked my brother, I've asked dad and stuff like that. And they've been like, no, you were just going about your day, you were doing stuff. For me, gone. There's no memories were formed during that day. And after that day, I was just at peace, just complete and utter fine. Okay. Calm. Knew I was going to die. I'd gone into the room to see where I was going to be laid when I was dead. I just didn't want to be in there very long because it was really emotional and it was kind of, I felt there was a lot of stuff going on in there. But after those 3 days, I was just completely calm. But then I started the cannabis. That's when it all kicked off again.
Questions about that, but first, I don't think there's very many people out here, especially young people, who can say that they've actually been involved in planning their own funeral. Like this is like one of the most, I don't know if it's the most interesting, but this is certainly something to me that is like, what? When your mom was telling me this story, this part had a huge impact on me. And I remember sitting at a table eating dinner with your mom, and I was eating my dinner, and she starts telling this part of the story, and I just set my fork down, and I was done. My dinner was over right there. So tell me what it's like as a young man to plan your own funeral.
So my beliefs, as they still are. I mean, at the time they were very strong. They still are. It was, I don't believe a funeral and a wake should be sad. It should be everything that person enjoyed doing shared with everyone. So I wanted to make it fun. I didn't want everyone to turn up in black suits and be all somber and sad. I wanted them to turn up in fancy dress, and I wanted it to be like the most ironic, uncomfortable fancy dress you could imagine because I thought it was hilarious. Like my nan's a devout Catholic, and she was going as a nun. So and things like, obviously my dad going as the Grim Reaper, and he was going to stand at the back and cough at people who and like point at people that had coughed or sneezed or anything like that during the sermon. And I just wanted it to be interesting. I wanted to be cremated made into a cannonball and fired into the sea. I wanted to make it as difficult as possible to get rid of my body. I wanted to make it as memorable as possible for people to just be like, "Oh fucking hell, what you do? You're just making it really difficult. Why are you doing this?" And just it was fun. Like that was it. It was just gonna be fun.
So how did you talk your dad, or was he all game to this whole Grim Reaper thing? Because that thing's hilarious.
Well, we'd made a deal, so it was whoever died first had to go as the Grim Reaper to the other person's funeral. And obviously I was gonna go first. So it was like, well, fucking up we go. Your turn.
I think it's neat that you had to pointing at people and just that
Yeah.
whole. You spent some time thinking about this.
Yeah. It took a while.
Is there any other costumes that stand out to you besides the Grim Reaper and the nun?
Well, there was the I don't know if Mum, she probably has, but the so we have a comedian over here called Russell Howard. I know he's been to America, he's done world tours and stuff. And he used to come and have he used to call them school dinners with me at the hospice. So he used to come and visit all the time, and we became like really good friends and stuff. And I asked him if he could come to my funeral, and he got all uncomfortable and stuff. And I was like, well, it's gonna be fancy dress. It's gonna be fancy dress. You got to come. And his favorite sketch of mine was a thing called Mr. Dildo.
Okay.
And it was really stupid. It was just him in a big dick costume running around like, and then just women would be reacting in funny ways and stuff. And it was funny to my like 14-year-old brain. It was amazing. And so I was like, well, I want you to come as a Mr. Dildo. So he had to get this big 6-foot massive dick costume made up for my funeral. And that's the main one that stands out. That's the best one, because I mean I'd only got a few ones down that were like true family members and stuff. So my nan, like my granddad and stuff like that, and Mum was gonna come as some like Victorian nurse or something like that. Yeah, it was funny.
I think it's absolutely amazing. Well, first of all, I watched that video of you on stage in the big dick costume. It was great. Your mom shared it with me. But I think it's amazing that you could find enough strength in you to make sure that everybody else was okay, Deryn.
Yeah.
Because that, my friend, is power. That is real power. People think it's money. It's not. Power is being able to affect people in a positive manner. And even though you were there and you were facing your death, you chose to look after other people first. And dude, that's big shit. I salute you for that. I recognize that. Anyway, before I get all emotional. So was you said that you got the sense of peace over you when you accepted the fact that you were going to die. It wasn't hard at all. Like you weren't having like, oh shit.
No. I mean, like I say, it was those 3 days of just complete like the word is serenity, just complete floating everywhere. No memories were needed to be made. It was complete ego death. Deryn was dead, gone. There was just a body going around waiting to die. When that body didn't die, I say it to everyone as there was a new Deryn come back. It wasn't the one that was before 14. He died and a new one came back. Completely different brain. Came back super heavy on the ego. Like, oh my God, I'm me. It was like a fucking baby was thrust into the body of a 14-year-old that had just come out of a hospice and was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Complete different person. It was crazy. And then so that was it. In my mind, I died, came back. So that was where the acceptance was just complete. There was no reason to not accept it, because in my heart of hearts and in my brain psychologically, there was no more of that Deryn. There was just gone.
Yeah. So would you say that at that point when you accepted it, you were tired of the fight? Because you've been fighting.
Oh yeah, completely. It was almost like it had gotten to the end. There was no more roads to go down. It was just, I'm gonna sit here and wait to just die. And there was like, well, fine. If you can't get out of it, you're gonna accept. It's like literally standing in the middle of a road and there's a truck 60 miles an hour down the road 10 feet away from you. You're like, well, fuck it. What can you do? What can you do? Just accept it in the last 10 seconds of your life, and you're good. there's nothing more you can do. That was my thinking.
You were such a badass, Deryn. You were such a badass. So let's switch gears just a little bit. I want to talk about when, I don't know, I don't remember exactly how it went, but when your mom decided to start treating you with alternatives things, right? In this particular case, cannabis.
Yeah.
When she came to you with this, were you accepting? Were you, I don't give a shit, it's whatever? I mean, wow. Tell me about that.
So I at the time was on, I think, 3 different sleeping pills that were just not working. Loads of pain medications that I didn't want to be on, so I was actually weaning off of them because I'd also didn't want to die off my face. I wanted to know what it was like to die. I wanted to know I wanted to be I wanted to be there, because it's something that you can only experience once. I wanted to know what it was like. So I didn't want to be on, like, off my face on morphine and stuff like that. I didn't want it. So they were weaning me off the pain medication and just giving me sleeping pills, but they weren't working. I was waking up and screaming, being like, why am I still here? What's going on? Because I was dreaming that I was dying, and I was dreaming that I was dead already, and I would be like walking around the room just looking at my body, being like complete and utter disconnect.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Just then waking up and being like, fucking, what was going on? And so mum was like, well, she knew from when she was a kid, and obviously everyone knows that weed is like, well, calms you down, chills you out, helps you sleep. And so she's like, she just got hold of some, gave it to me in the tincture form. Because we tried vaping it first, and vaping it just there wasn't enough. It wasn't working.
Yeah.
So just went straight for the teaspoon, straight in the mouth, swill it around my mouth and swallow it. And after 5-10 minutes, it would just feel like calming. And then after 20 minutes, there would be this warm, felt like I was being scanned. So it would start at my toes, and there would just be a line go all the way up my body, all the way around. And once it reached my head, I'd just be like, oh. And then I could sleep, and I would sleep for hours then. Whereas before with the sleeping pills, it would be like it felt like an hour, 20 minutes at most. And I'd be up again going, what's going on? And obviously then you can't have more sleeping pills, because then after a while you start to hallucinate, and you're just fucked in the head anyway. You don't want that, even if you are dying. So that's what it was. So it was kind of I'll try anything. I'll try it because I've already tried everything. Yeah. It was just another thing that could be given to me that might work or might not work. It was just another thing.
So when did you start having hope that maybe this wasn't the end?
Well, it wasn't hope.
That would be, talk about an emotional roller coaster, right? Yeah.
So for me, it was actually despair and hatred. I did not want to be alive. After the hospice, and after my red blood cells had started to come back again, and all the doctors and everyone was like, shit, what's going on? You're not dying anymore. Get out of the hospice. We're just doing loads of tests, loads of blood tests, and just everything was going on again. I was just like, fuck off. I'm done. Leave me alone. I can't deal with this anymore. This is too much. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was done. I thought this was over. And here it goes again. Here it starts again. Because the only options available to me were death or more treatment. There was no death or you're now magically healthy again. You're now how I am now. This has taken 10 years.
Yeah.
This isn't, a month or so later. This is a decade later that I'm still just barely getting there. So it in my brain then was just like, fuck it, death is easier than this. And so I went on like a hunger strike effectively for 6 months. I just didn't eat any more than maybe 50 calories. I would just skimp on a few things. I would eat nibbles of a digestive after a 2-3 hour screaming match. I was straight up refusing to do anything other than what was forced upon me. So when I was taken to a hospital appointment, when I was injected with something, when I had a needle put into me, no other choice. but my only thing that I could control was what went in my face. And even then, they stuck nose tubes in me, force fed me that way, and I was just like, nothing's going in this face. And so after 6 months, they said that they were going to force feed me, sedate me, section me if I didn't start eating. And that would have been pointless anyway, because the chemo and radiotherapy had destroyed my gut. So I couldn't absorb any food anyway. I was having to eat maybe 4,000 calories to get 1,000. There was no way I was absorbing the amount of food that was being put into me. And they just wanted to put more and more, and they were pointless. But luckily that coincided with the time that we were going to go to Spain. We wanted a holiday to Spain, and they were like, well, if he doesn't get better by the time he's back from Spain, then we're going to have to section him, sedate him, and force feed him. But then we went to Spain to go and get oil. And I spent the whole 2 weeks just off my face eating probably 3,000 calories worth of pistachio nuts. Just,
so you successfully got the munchies.
Hard munchies. I mean, 8 hours a day, I was just eating constantly for 8 hours a day. I would sit in a chair, massive chair, eating these big kilos of like pistachio nuts, and then we'd go out for dinner, and I'd just be like at this restaurant going, I need to eat everything. And like every day I had the same thing, just this massive pile of spaghetti bolognese with loads of cheese, and I'd just eat so much of it. They'd look at me, I was like a stick, really skinny, proper like this, and they'd look at mum and dad and go, sure he's gonna eat this? And they'd look at me, and I'd be like, eyes like red, couldn't look out of them, and they'd be like, I'm pretty sure he's gonna eat it.
Yeah.
And I'd demolish it every time. But that, eating probably 4,000, 5,000 calories of nuts, cheese, just pasta and all sorts every day for like 2 weeks, made me put on like 4.5 kilos. So when I went back, they were like, well, we don't need to section him. We don't need to do anything. He's put on weight and he's way better. Because of the weed and the food. It wasn't because of any sedation and sectioning. It was because I went on holiday and had loads of nice food and weed. Like,
yeah. So when in there did you, because you were talking about how you kind of were pissed, right? And I'm super fascinated about this spot, because you fought, then you accepted, hey, I'm out of here. And now maybe you're not out of here. Now what the are you people doing to me, you know?
Yeah.
So I certainly get all of that, but when did you say, okay, I'm no longer mad that I may live? How did that happen?
It was a slow process. So I didn't really notice it happen. I think it was when I went back and did year 11. So it was when I went back to school and started to kind of socialize again. And I went back to school purely to socialize, even though it was the year that I had to do my GCSEs and I had no prep for them at all. I had 1 school year to prep and do my GCSEs, but I didn't care. I was going back to socialize. I was going back to be a normal kid. I was going back to be, oh, this is cool. I'm a kid again. Like I'm back at school. That was probably the moment. And that was 2015. So a year and a half, a year maybe it took.
Wow. You know, I think this whole story is super interesting, and I loaded some questions in here that I want to talk about, kind of the deeper parts of all of this, because the story, Deryn, is super powerful. And I salute you. I salute your mom, and you know, I've never met your father, but he went through it too, you know. So I salute you. But going through all of this, do you think that, and you became spiritual along the way, which I think is super fascinating. So what's your purpose? Why you?
I've thought about that a lot. I don't think I've got a purpose any more than just kind of to exist. And whatever comes of that comes of that. Like, it's just everything to me now is an experience. Everything is new. Everything is different. It's just like, it may happen again and again and again, but there's something different about it every time. Like, I can do the most monotonous thing every day as long as it's something that's fairly interesting.
Mhm.
and I'll find something interesting in it if I have to do it. It doesn't really matter. It's like like I say, I'm spiritual. I firmly believe that I'm spiritual, but it's also very scientific. I'm atoms. I'm made from stars. Everyone's made from stars. I am just the universe experiencing the universe in a different way. These
Mhm.
atoms have come together to make a human being to experience other atoms as a chair, as the sun, as a table, as whatever, as the breeze across your face. Whatever. Everything is nice if you can look at it in a certain way. That is the only real purpose there is. There's no other purpose to me. It's just to exist.
Yeah, it's so crazy to hear you say that to me because your stories impacted so many people I know that we don't even know you, right? I mean, you're all the way
Yeah.
over a whole nother place. And when your mom told your story in Kansas, she got up and speak, the whole crowd was crying. There were these big, brawly, huge alpha
Yeah.
males who your mom brought to their knees, and it was just such an empowering, for me personally, such an empowering experience. Um, so your mom told me about how you would spend time with the other kids in the hospital, and some of them who died,
Yeah.
who didn't get through. Do you hold any guilt? Like, do you feel that you made it and they didn't? Do you have any issues with any of those kinds of things?
No. And this is something that I I have problem. I'm gonna be truthful. I do have problems with mum sometimes
Mhm.
because I have absolutely no guilt. I have no survivor's guilt at all because that was their thing.
Mhm.
That was it. They don't have to struggle anymore. They're done. It may be shitty for them at that time, but again, they may have been young, but their soul, if you believe in a soul, chose it.
Mhm.
And that may have been the only thing that they wanted to experience at that time. That was it. It doesn't it's sad, it's upsetting. And when I think back to them, I love them dearly and I am upset that they're gone, but that's life, really. That is just the way that it's gone on forever. And I just happen to be one of those people that have lasted longer. I'm not going to skirt death. Everyone dies. I've just happened to last longer. And that's no fault of my own. That's just how it is. So there's no reason to feel guilty.
Mhm. It's interesting to me, and I don't know if this is because of what you went through, but I like that you live in the moment because nobody's promised tomorrow. And I think
Yeah.
if more people did this, the world would be a better place, Deryn. But do you think you have a tendency to live in that moment because of your experience, or do you think you would have always been there anyway? That's just who you are.
I mean, it's difficult because I being autistic anyway, that's how most autistic people live is just day to day. It's just because that's the only way you can cope with a lot of emotions that happen to you. But it's definitely because of what's happened to me that I am now very much in the moment of, well, during hospital and stuff like that, I would go out for lunch and a room that I had been in for weeks would now not be my room. That would be someone else's room that needed it more because it happened to be closer to the nurse's station or whatever. And they were in that moment a worse position than me. And that change happened in over the course of a sandwich. I don't know what can happen in the next half an hour, let alone the next week, the next 10 days, the next year. I have not a clue. So what's the point in trying to speculate if you don't know? You can only know when things start to trigger and you can then react to them because that's the only thing you can do is react. And maybe you can look at sequences and maybe predict something, but even then you'll be surprised because it might not happen, or it might happen when you didn't think it was going to happen.
Yeah.
You just got to be prepared for as many things as possible and just like I say, exist. Just get on with your day, and if that day's good, then great. If you wake up tomorrow, see if the next day's good or bad. If it's bad, then so what? The next day might be good. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. When for everybody, when Deryn and I were talking before we went live, I had asked him, I said, you know, man, considering everything that you've been through, does every other problem seem small now? And he goes, actually, yeah, and it gets me in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of see that. I kind of see how you, because you've been through so much, how it would be. Do you look at other people sometimes and go, quit bitching, dude? You got no problems. Like, you do that?
Yeah. I used to be quite bad at it. Now I've gotten to the point where I understand that everyone's troubles are their own.
Mhm.
But still, the troubles that I come with is authority. So I have problems with authority. So if I don't believe that something should be followed because I believe that that works with my moral compass and works with a majority, it helps more people than it hinders, I won't do it. So when I'm at work, if it's something like, oh, you need to go and do some obscure thing just because I say you have to do it, I'm like, fuck off. No.
Yeah.
Explain to me why you want it happening and why it should be beneficial for me to go and do this thing, and I'll go and do it. I'll do anything if that's the thing. I will do anything, but not until you explain it in a way that I want to do it.
Yeah.
So,
So is that, do you
yeah.
think that's because of what you went through?
Yeah.
Do you
Oh,
think
yeah,
that
100%, 100%. It's a total lack of like, well, I don't
like,
care.
you're right.
I
Like, what
don't
do you think
care.
you need?
Yeah, exactly. What can you do to me? The only thing, because me not doing a task at work isn't going to land me in jail.
Right.
What can you do? You can fire me, right? I'll get another job.
Right. Right. Not a big deal.
It's not a big deal for a lot of people. Yeah, that's a big deal, and fair enough to them. That's a big deal. But for me, I don't care. I don't care about working at some job if it means that it's going to sacrifice my happiness and my moral compass.
Yeah.
They're
How
my major points. Now, it just shifted my perspective from being my major focus is the moral compass, and that's about it. It's just following your moral compass and trying to be happy.
yeah.
And
Well, there's nothing wrong
and
with that.
yeah,
Right. That's who your moral compass is, who you are.
yeah.
You know, that's big. Well, tell me about, how do you now view modern medicine and the medical system? How do you look at it?
It's it's been hijacked. So I'm probably sure my mum says the same thing, but she's also a bit further away from the path that I am. She does not trust it at all. Whereas me, there is a lot of benefit to it. There are some things that humans have done that nature just cannot do. We separated ourselves from nature a long time ago. That's why we have so many issues we have. So, but also on the same side, we are nature. So anything that we create is an expression of nature itself. It has been hijacked by bad people out for more money. The NHS as a thing was a socialist belief. It's a at its heart, it is everyone should care for everyone. We should be able to help everyone. But when drug companies and other people get in for nefarious ways, and there are trials being bought out and there are things being misled, people are lying, people are looking out for profits over health, then yeah, of course it's going to be a bad thing, and people are going to want to look for more healthy, naturalistic ways. But in my eyes, they both work together. Like, I had to have surgery on my ankle. There was no way that I was going to go through surgery without having modern anesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
Not a chance. No way. No amount of chemotherapy or opioids were going to get me through that. I needed something that even modern medicine doesn't understand yet,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to take a chunk of bone out of your body that was attached there. It's not going to be
Right.
it's not going to be pleasant. So in my eyes, there is a still a trust, but a wariness.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be very careful. You can't just agree to anything. Like so my ejection fraction in my left ventricle is 50%. The minimum is 55%, and then they start to say, well, there's been some form of damage. Your heart's not as good as it should be, but it's still only 50%. It's not any problem. What they wanted to do for that was give me just heart medication. And I said to the doctor, I was like, I have been on this road before. I've been where I've had an anti-sickness because I felt ill from the chemo. Then that anti-sickness has had a side effect of nausea and of a different kind. So then I've had another anti-sickness to counteract that anti-sickness. But then this one had a funny feeling as well. So then you have a third one and then a fourth one to counter the third one. And I've been on that road before. I don't want to be having 50 different medications just because you need the first one. I'd rather go without the first one.
Right.
And he said, oh, no. The only problems really that most people say about this one is you maybe get a shortness of breath or something like that. You might feel a bit tired. And I'm like, well, okay, that's not so bad. I can deal with that. I get the medication. I look at the side effects. In a common is a heart attack. Common side effects is a heart attack. And that was like 1 in every 10,000 people or something. And I'm like, well, I got a cancer that was 5 in 7 billion. I'm not going to take that risk. I'm not going to take the risk of having a pill-induced heart attack over maybe the possibility of having one in my 40s, 50s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do that. And so he lied to me. He didn't tell me the full risks. That's the problem with the medical industry. That's where you then need to have your brain switched on and go, well, I'm going to take my own side of this and go, maybe it's not worth it just yet. Just yet. You can look at other things first. So like, if you never eat tomatoes, for instance, tomatoes are amazing for your heart. They're amazing for your blood. Even something as simple as that, if you were just eating crap all the time, if you just started eating tomatoes, that's going to make your heart better. It's going to make your blood flow better. It's going to make things nicer. Go for walks, exercise, all things that you can do before you start taking the risk of a heart attack.
Mm-hmm. So are you still picky in what you eat?
Oh, I'm a vegan.
Okay. But are you picky?
So, yeah.
I mean, do you eat the same? Again, we started this conversation with you would eat the same meal every day of a baked potato and coleslaw. And are you still super picky? Like you have the same regimen?
I'm not as much, but that's because I went vegan. So before I was vegan, I was very much, I want to kind of eat the same things over and over again, wasn't very adventurous or anything like that. But then since going vegan, I love tofu. I mean, you don't hear many people say that.
Right.
Like I love different kinds of beans, whereas before it would just be like baked beans in tomato sauce. Now I love pinto beans, black beans, legumes, fucking butter beans, lentils, all sorts of things, like bulgur wheat. I had no idea what bulgur wheat was before. I know what it is now and I love it. So quinoa, everything. My mind has just gone just so much more food now. But that was because I had to go vegan. That wasn't, So
do you eat baked potatoes with coleslaw? Do you eat that same thing?
Oh, I still do now. Yeah.
You love it?
Oh, I do. I still love that. Yeah. My taste buds went back. I now love that again, which is nice.
Yeah. So are you still using hemp oils and all that? Is that a normal process for you still?
Yeah. I have my oils here.
Okay.
So I usually get the FICO, so it's the full extract cannabis oil, and I make it up into tinctures. So I've gone right back to where I was in the hospice, making tinctures again, because I used to go from having just the straight oil on like a cracker or something, so you couldn't really measure it, to then making capsules, to now I've gone back to just tinctures again because they're the most accurate, because you can have like a single drop. You can make them as strong or as weak as you want, and you can mix them with a carrier oil so that you can it goes further deeper into your body, so it's way easier.
Yeah, and I don't know what the here in America that stuff would be fairly easy to get from a tincture perspective. Is it hard where you are, or is it easy too? Just from
for me, no, but for most people, yeah. But I'm gonna have to stop you there because I do need the toilet. I'll be back in a second.
Well, hello everybody. So today I'm going to interview a pillow, and it's a beautiful pillow. No, so Deryn will be right back. I've got about, I don't know, 8 or more questions on my list talking about what a great young man, huh? I was been so excited to hear it from his perspective because, we all live it differently. And, it's amazing to me, when I was listening to Callie talk about his story, how it totally tore me up because I'm a parent. But yet through this young man's eyes, it wasn't as big a deal. And I think that's just so fascinating to me. It's like, what? He was the one going through it, getting poked, getting prodded and all of that. And yet I bet it was harder on Callie before it was all said and done, or at least I think it would be, I'm a parent. So as I look through it, but man, how crazy is that? Well, I'm excited he decided to join us. Hey, if you guys got any questions, I have not really been paying attention to the comments all that much, but we could absolutely put them down in there. All better?
Yep.
All right, cool. Yeah. I've just got a few more questions, and then we'll get you out of here because I know
that's fine. Yeah, I'm good.
This is a fascinating conversation to me. I'm curious about your relationship with your mom, and what. Let me ask specifically what I mean by that is that you went through a lot with this lady, right? I mean, not like what. Like normally what happens is like my mom is an example, I went through childhood. She whooped my ass from time to time, whatever.
Yeah.
She calls me and tells me I work too much. That's it. That's the end of it. I love my mom. But you have a whole different, like you have a much more in-depth experience and your guys' perceptions are very different. And so I'm just curious, tell me how your relationship with your mom has changed from 10 to now. Because it's got to be a lot.
So when I was younger, there was just no respect. As I guess most people are, they don't really respect their parents. They're just people that annoy them. And there was a lot of problems. But now it's still, I still don't see eye to eye with her on everything because we have separate beliefs, of course. And she annoys me sometimes, but there's a respect there that wasn't there before. Mm-hmm. So that's the main thing. There's more respect rather than, because I'm not a lovey person anyway. I don't like hugs. I don't like I'll express my feelings and stuff like that, but it's still very much I don't really have them to express them. They're just kind of there. Whenever they come up in certain situations. So it's very much like it's just more of a respect thing. If someone has my respect, it means more than me to like any other thing.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's so interesting to me how much our experience changes us, or is it just how we, kind of naturally are? Do you think that I don't have a lot of feelings, I don't like lugs, have to do with your experience, or is that just, you think it's just who you were always meant to be?
So that's who I was always meant to be. So it's also the reason why I've had the experiences I have. So it's nature versus nurture, in it. And my beliefs on that is your nature allows you to react to your nurture in the way that you would express yourself. So if you only react to your nurture in a certain way because of your nature. Everyone can be given the exact same stimulus and they'll have a different reaction. That's because everyone's nature is different. The nurture comes from the experiences that you have and how you react to them based on your nature.
Yeah, how deep? Yeah, you were way smarter than your age. You know that? You really are, Deryn. And I don't mean smart or book smart, even although that's probably true too. I'm talking about what's on the inside of us, understanding how people work. That is super badass. Let me see here. When you were in the hospital, I know you had a lot of kids and all that. Do you have any relationships with any of them? Any of them that have made it, all that? I mean, do you talk to any of them? Doctors, nurses, anybody?
No. There's one person I think I follow on Instagram, but I never speak to her. And that was a nursing assistant that used to just come and sit and watch TV with me while I was in hospital. And that was it. And there's no one else. There are a few people that I could get in contact with if I knew, but I mean, the majority of people that I know, I just assume that they aren't here anymore. and maybe there's a couple of people that might still be alive, but the rest I think aren't.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no real, there's no way to.
Yeah, got it. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your future real quick. Let's just spend the last couple minutes and we'll just talk about that. So I know that you live very in the moment, Deryn. I've got this clear in our conversation. But do you think about wife, kids, future, long term, or is it nope?
I do. Like I don't dwell on it, but I do when I watch things and I get reminded of stuff that it's like, well, there's the innate part of me that would love to have a kid, to have something that's like, oh, that's quite cool. That's mine. That is something that is mine. I can shape it, build it up, make it its own person. But then also, I can't have that. I'm blank. There's nothing. I've had tests. I'm going for tests recently, soon as well to see as well. But as far as I know, there's nothing. So my only option is adoption, which I would be open to doing. But also, I don't want to have a child in the world as it is now. And even if I did have the ability to have a child of my own, I wouldn't want to because of the genetics that would be passed down. I wouldn't want to give it the opportunity to have cancers, to have autism, ADHD, Tourette's, PTSD, because that's what life gives you. I wouldn't want that to happen. There's no life, there's no world at the moment that I can see that I would want to bring a child into. The only way that I would want to do that is if literally I could go to some secluded place that would never be touched by the world ever again, to be completely off grid and just exist on my own, do whatever I wanted, and just whatever, and have just a little society. That's the only way that I would be happy to do something like that, because everything else is just too uncomfortable. And as much as I believe that we're here to just exist and to experience stuff, a lot of the experiences are shitty and you have to kind of work your way around them to deal with them. And a lot of them are society based. And until we change society as a whole, there's nothing really that I feel like is worth having from it.
Yeah. So if you were Prime Minister of Great Britain, what would you change? Because
I'd get assassinated. That's what would change. We have a lot of money. I mean, Britain is the third richest country on the planet.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest economies on the planet. It's just a lot of the money is siphoned off to other places. If the money was in the right places, we could have an amazing society. Things could be amazing. And I annoy a lot of people, but I believe that there should be just the world as a whole should just exist together. The countries that have resources should help the countries that don't have resources. The countries that are prosperous at the moment can help build up the ones that aren't. So everyone works out. We're all humans. Doesn't matter where we're from. We live on the planet. The planet has the resources for everyone. Why can't everyone just like kind of use them to build up rather than destroy each other for effectively made up reasons? Or things that have been ingrained into people for generations because that's just what their parents did. That doesn't really sit right with me.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know what the problem that lies, and I know a lot about these topics, and because I think the world's shit right now too. But the problem isn't you and me, Deryn. The problem is these elected politicians that get into office and think that they do whatever they want. They don't represent the people. I think if you just talk to everyday people, we're not full of hate.
No.
People are good people. We got to get rid of the government. The government's the problem.
Yeah, there's a reason that humanity has survived for this long and to have even gotten to this point.
Right.
We work together. There are more ways that we work together than we hate each other. And of course, the more we evolve, there'll be more paths that people go down. So there'll be more ways for people to become uncomfortable with the way that someone else lives. But unless you, as a person, the only way you want to live is to go out of your way to cause harm to other people, they're the only reason, really, they're the only people that you need to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else is fine. Everyone else is fine because they don't want to cause harm to anyone else. They just want to live their life and just get on with it and not have too many problems, because everyone's a human. They have problems that they don't want. It's the ones that don't really have any problems or want to change things to suit their way that are the ones that are the issues.
Yeah, you know, but we're going to get out of here. But I think before we do, I got two final questions for you. The first one is, I know people who are going through cancer and who are going through trial tribulations, and I think your attitude is amazing. I can hang out with you any day of the week, bud. I'm telling you, you get over here to the United States, come out to my farm. We'll put you on the 4-wheeler. You guys go have a blast. We'll whatever. Right? We'll make you feel at home, fish in the pond. We'll go swimming, whatever it is. And I would welcome that day. But what advice would you give someone who's going through those kinds of things about hanging in there and about being able to overcome it? Because I don't know that a lot of people could do what you did, bud, to be honest with you. I just don't.
It's not necessarily about looking at your situation as a whole. My awareness of my outside situation and the beliefs that I have now came from a lot of introspection.
Mm-hmm.
They came from loads of these just guided meditations, past life regression meditations. They may be complete farce, but they changed something in my brain that allowed me to experience things in a different way, so that I could look at the situation I was in and find some benefit from it, rather than just being over encumbered with the, oh my God, I'm having chemo, I'm going to die, I've got cancer, what is going on? I'm not having a normal life. My mates are out playing. You've got to go in. You have to go inwards. Otherwise, you will just explode. You can't keep taking in stimulus without processing it inside. And because so much stimulus is going in with cancer treatment, you have to process it inside very quickly. Otherwise, you'll just be eaten away and destroyed by it. And that's what I've seen with countless people. And the most people that would complain and find everything to be bad, and they could find nothing good in it. And even if the only good thing you can find in that day is, oh, I've got dinner that I like, I've got the choice of a meal that I actually enjoy, even if I can't taste it too much, I still enjoy it, I like that piece of food, that's your good thing for the day. That will get you through. So that's the main thing. You just go inwards and you'll find the things that will help you on the outside.
Man, what great advice, bud. I mean, you, like I said, you're smart, but way above your years. And Deryn, I hope that the day comes someday where we can actually meet in person. And I think that would be just incredible and badass. And, you know, there's not a lot of people I'll tell this to, but my life's better with you in it. You're a badass. I mean that. And I'm super impressed. So I guess we're going to get out of here. Thank you for your time. Thanks for coming by. Yep. It's amazing to me. And, you know, I love your mom. We've gotten to be good friends. And again, I hope we get to see you in the United States of America.
Oh, definitely.
We'll see you, bud. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Guys, good day.